Welcome back to the Tim Teaches podcast. I'm your host, Tim McCoy. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Scott Stewart. Today's topic is on forgiveness. I know we've all done things that we hope to be forgiven for. Scott, your story is on forgiving someone has to be pushing the absolute bounds of forgiveness. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself to everybody, and we're going to
Mhm.
jump right into this.
Yeah, hey, Tim, thanks so much for having me, man. This is what an honor. I appreciate you allowing me to share with your audience. Yeah, nothing really special about me, right? I grew up in small town America. I was adopted, if that makes me different, but I was adopted at birth, and I had a very didn't take me long to figure out I had a very abusive father that had extreme anger issues, and fast forward for just a moment, August 5th of 1991, that was a Monday night. What I didn't know was that night that I went over to have dinner with my mom and dad. I didn't live there anymore, but I went and had dinner with them, and when I walked out that door, what I didn't know was that was gonna be the last time I'd ever see my mom again. And I'm gonna follow that up with this: anything is forgivable if we hold the right belief about it and we have the correct understanding of who forgiveness is for. Okay. Now, let me go back just a little bit. Growing up in small town America, mom, dad, I learned very quickly I had a very unhealthy understanding of what love was. And what I refer to is family love, right? I had a father with extreme anger issues, and I had a mom who I loved, who I was very close with, but she was a world class enabler. I mean, she had a PhD in enabling, okay? Um, and for every time my dad was mad, every time my dad, got mad, he yelled, he screamed, he threw things more times than I care to share, hit on my mom, uh, or hit her, abused me. She always had a reason for it, Tim. She
Uh,
always had a reason, it was he had a bad day. He didn't get much sleep at work, his back's been giving him trouble. I mean, the list is endless, and she never addressed or faced the real issue. And so that was the house I grew up in. Now you combine that with a little ADHD, and I had a heck of a time learning through school. So with a dad with anger issues, what do you think his solution was to help me learn better?
oh, you got a hit, Jeff.
Yeah, of course. You got to yell, scream, take things away. And of course we know today that that doesn't work, right? So I couldn't wait to get out of high school. I mean, I just I struggle is really an understatement. Some people say, "Yeah, I got C's and B's." No, I got D's and F's. I was able to get through school just enough to finally and barely graduate with a diploma, and I wanted nothing more to do with school because between the inability to not retain information, I had a father who only escalated the issue, and so for me, school going on past high school was not an option. It was never gonna happen. I moved out. I put some space between my father and I. I had to because his anger issues had gone already, Tim, from, like, here, even, way up here, and we I watched my mom not willing to give up.
Mhm.
I watched her not willing to give up and quit on her marriage, and I remember a handful of times she would call me in the middle of the night. She was crying. She was upset, because it was another night that he didn't come home. He had found himself a girlfriend, and I think looking back on it, maybe in addition to a lot of unresolved trauma in his life, I think he was going through a midlife crisis, but he found himself a girlfriend, and I remember my mom saying, "This is my damn house. he's going to have to leave. I'm not leaving, and that comes from a little bit of that generation, of our parents. We're probably not too far off on age, but that was the generation that, when you say death till you part, there's some truth in that. I
Yeah.
mean, people stuck it out. They hung together. And it continued to escalate over the next few years. And I'll come back around now to that Monday night, that August 5th of 1991. I stopped by their house after work. My mom made homemade spaghetti, and it was, man, it was amazing. It was just incredible. And it was actually a relatively enjoyable night. My dad was not yelling. He was not mad. We had a nice meal together. We talked. I was there a couple hours, and I got ready to leave, and my mom followed me from the kitchen through the hallway and out to the front room. And as I started to go out the front door, she says, "Hey, you turn around here." So I turned around and I gave her a hug. I kissed her on the cheek and I said, "Mom, I love you." And she said, "I love you too." And that was the last time I ever saw her again. A few hours later, in a fit of rage, my father went into the garage while my mom lay sleeping in her bed. He went into the garage and he got probably a couple, 3 feet, probably 3 feet. He grabbed a stainless steel bar. And while she lay in her bed, um, he went in, I'll spare you the gory details, but he went in the room and basically killed her with a stainless steel bar. He then self-inflicted some wounds and called 911 and said somebody had broke in to the house and knocked him unconscious and then had killed my mom. Well, police are a little smarter than that.
Yeah, that lasted about 5 minutes, right?
Yeah,
That story.
yeah. When the police showed up and the door was still locked and there was no evidence of a scuffle or a fight or anything, that didn't last very long. So to speed the story along, I get a phone call at midnight that night. I'm sound asleep in my bed. I get a phone call and it's my cousin. And he says, "Scott, you have to get over here to mom and dad's house like right now." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Get over here right now." So I threw on some clothes and I fly over. I was in a nearby town about 8, 9 miles away. They live on a street about a mile long, kind of semi-rural, just a straight stretch, no trees. There's only fields. When I turned on that street and made that corner, it looked like a town was lit up down there at my folks' house. I mean, there was sheriffs, there were deputies, there were state police, there were city police, there were ambulances, there was rescue squads. I mean, it looked like something out of a movie, And I remember pulling up. I pulled up to the house, and there's caution tape all the way around the house. All of the lights are on, doors are open, windows are open. And at this moment, I don't know that she's been killed. And I'm just like freaking the hell out, And I make a beeline straight across the street. I'm going to walk into that house. I don't care what kind of tape is there. This is my mom and dad's house, And this police officer comes over and goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hold on. Who are you?" And I said, I'm Scott. My mom and dad live here. Let me through." And he wouldn't let me through. And he kind of guided me off to the side. And I remember he started questioning me. In a homicide scene or a murder scene, the closest people are always the first suspects.
Yeah.
And I was there earlier that night, and there was evidence of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so he puts me in the patrol car, and he's asking me questions. And then he finally told me, he said, "Your mom is deceased." And I remember just like this fog, this haze of like, how can that be? How is that possible? And my cousin and grandmother and other family were just across the across the driveway and stuff. So I went and talked to them. And the very worst thing that could happen happened. And they had hauled my dad off in a police car. And they ever did see them take my mom's body out of the house, but they took her out, put her in an ambulance, and then, went to probably, I forget the name of it, but where they hold the bodies, but when they do an investigation.
Mhm.
As you might imagine, at a 22-year-old kid with no goals, no foundation, no real direction in life, I kind of went into a tailspin. And my vice, just to get through the day, was drinking. I never I never got into the hard drugs, I really never even got into marijuana, but alcohol numbed what I had experienced. It numbed it enough that I could get through the day. And that was the next couple of years of my life. Before I go on with that, though, if that's not crazy enough, it gets even a little crazier. About 2 weeks later, my sister, now she's my half sister. She's my sister from my dad's previous marriage. And she's about 10, 12 years older than I am. But anyway, she's in touch with my dad while he's in jail. And she says, I have to go look in his eyes. I got to go see him while he's in jail. I don't know if I can believe he did this. I have to look into his eyes and see it for myself. She said, do you want to? Yeah.
Is he denying that he did it at this time, or is he kind of cop to it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for bringing that up, because I skipped a small part. I apologize.
That's okay.
The first week, he denied it. Well, after like day 2 or 3, the police did not have quite enough evidence to hold him, so they had to let him go. Yeah. Well, right at about 6 days, 7 days, somewhere in there, he admits it. He to the police, they were interviewing him once again, and he finally
Yeah.
said, I did it. Well, in the state of Oregon, you admit to murder, you go straight to the front of the line for sentencing. There's no trial. There's no wasting time. You go straight to jail, and that sentencing, that goes into process of when that's going to happen. So he had admitted to it by this point, right? So he's not getting out now. Okay. So my sister says, I need to go look at him. I need to go look in his eyes and did he really do this? And she asked me, she said, do you want to go along? Now, at this time, this whole thing is still just a bit of a haze, right? I'm hoping to wake up from a really horrible dream, and I agreed to go. I was reluctant, but I agreed to go. So I go down with her. It was county jail is where we were at, not a state, but a county jail. And we go in, and it's just like what you would see in the movie. I go in, I sit down, there's a phone on the wall. He comes in, he sits down, he's in the orange jumpsuit. He sits down. Now, my father, he had a military grade license in manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
All the years I grew up, he was a master manipulator. When I say military grade, he knew how to get at what he wanted out of people, and not in a good way. So we sit down, he grabs the phone, I grab the phone, and he's looking at me. And I can tell the way he's looking at me, it almost just even thinking about it, because I can still picture it, just sends chills down my spine, right? But he starts talking. I'm a little hesitant. I'm a little scared. I'm a little nervous. I'm just a mess.
Oh, yeah.
And we talk about some small things, and we talk a little bit about, he already is starting to talk about, he goes, well, when I get out of here, yeah,
Thanks, Dad.
yeah, right. And about 4 minutes go by, and then he says, he looked at me, and there was this pause. And he looked right at me, and he said, do you think I killed your mom? And I was like, I don't know what to think. I can't believe any of this has happened. I don't even I don't even know what to make of this. And he looked right at me, Tim, and he said, well, he goes, I didn't. He goes, but I told the police I did to cover up for you because I thought you did it.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Knowing this
God
is
is
being recorded, this is just out.
this out. God is
Wow.
my witness. God is my witness. I'll never forget that moment. And I just sat there like this. Like I couldn't even talk.
Yeah. He's setting up his alibi. What a
Yeah. Yeah. What a POS, right? You can say it. So our conversation finished because I just couldn't talk.
yeah.
I mean, literally, I just was, and I left the room. My sister comes in and talks to him. I go out kind of outside in the hallway, and I'm just, almost like I got a haymaker on the right side, and I just went into this like fuzzy la la land. She's in there about 10 or 15 minutes, talks with him, and then comes out, and we walk to the car, and I couldn't say anything. I couldn't talk, and we get in the car, and she goes, well, how did that go for you? And I said, I don't think you're going to believe what he said. And she said, well, what did he say to you? And I told her,
Mhm.
and she was just like, you're kidding. And I said, no. And I don't remember much of the car ride home after that. But, life goes on, right?
He denied it to her as well, then obviously.
Yeah, she never shared that. I was just so freaking dumbfounded, dude.
Yeah.
I don't think I even asked her any questions about what he said. I just was so I was just so awestruck.
He's lying to your face, and then he's also setting you up for a murder charge.
Absolutely.
Whoa.
Yeah, 100%, right? So, anybody who has been through something like this, the one thing that you realize real quick is that and is that the world really truly doesn't stop turning for you. And even though my world stopped, I mean, honestly, the world didn't stop. It kept going, and I had to somehow function. So again, I turned to the booze. About 2 or 3 months goes by, and all of a sudden there are 3 young girls who come forward and say, we never wanted to tell anybody, but he was touching us in ways that adults aren't supposed to touch us. And that had happened years earlier. I don't know exactly how many years. So now we have child molestation
Mhm.
on top of murder, on top of trying to set up his son for a murder charge.
What a guy.
What a guy. What a guy. The next couple of years are a blur. But in that time, somewhere around year 2, I had a coworker. I say friend. He was really more of a coworker. But a really good guy. He was a Christian man. And we had just, we'd worked together for years. So we just, I mean, we never hung out really on the weekends, but he was a good dude.
Mhm.
And I was at lunch one day, and I was sitting in the cafeteria, and it was a hard day. And he came over and sat by me, and we just small talked, about work and stuff like that. And he said, looked over at me, and he just kind of did one of these, looked at me, and I, like 30 seconds later, I'm like feeling this stare to my head, and I looked over, I go, what the hell are you looking at? And he goes, how are you doing? And I remember just looking at him, and within seconds, right? I mean, my eyes started leaking, and I turned back around to focus on something. And he goes, no, seriously, Scott, how are you doing? I honestly want to know. And dude, I just lost it. I mean, I get emotional when I tell this story because I mean, I lost it, and I had been trying to just function, hold my job together so I didn't get fired. I was dealing with attorneys. My mom and dad had 3 different properties, so there were attorneys involved, there was estate stuff going on, and I was just this lost soul who was trying to numb the pain so I could get through every day.
Okay.
And basically I said, "I'm not doing real good. It's a rough day." And he goes, "You've had quite a few rough days." And I said, "I have." And he said, he said, "We probably," he said, "You can't keep going like this, right? You know that." And I said, "I do know that," because I was headed down a dark, dark road.
Mm.
And through him, through a couple different people, I ended up started going to a counselor. And in this time that I started going to counseling, my dad got sentenced. I did go to the sentencing. I did not talk with him, but I saw him from, across the courtroom. Um, you know, but he was sentenced to a mandatory. Now I'm not going to get into politics, especially Oregon politics, but this is, bro, this is 1995.
Yeah.
3 counts of child molestation and murder, and he only got 20 years.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now this is a few years ago. This is
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
and he had already served like 4.5 years.
Oh my.
So he had, 15 and a half more to go. And I remember the judge told him, he said, "This is mandatory. There is no eligibility for parole if you're a good boy or not." Right. I mean, it was, so 4.5 already served,
Yeah.
had another 15 and a half to go.
No, that's not much for
No, it's no, not for that.
no,
Right.
no,
I mean, holy smokes.
no
Anyway,
money.
I had family members that were livid over that.
Mhm.
And, yeah, just livid. And they have every right to be, right? Someone they loved, someone they looked up to, they admired in their family, was gone. And I think, people have a right to be pissed, to be extremely angry. But anyway, I started going to counseling. Some things in counseling, I'm a product, Tim, that if you get the right counselor, it'll change your life night and day. If you don't get the right counselor, you'll walk away and go, "Oh, that was a freaking waste of time," or "That was a waste of money." You're right.
That's me.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I understand that. I totally get that. I was fortunate enough, call it God's favor, God's grace, timing, what the universe, whatever you want to call it. But I got the right counselor. And I stayed with her and saw her sometimes weekly, sometimes every other week, like for 2.5 years straight. We hardly ever missed any time in there. And um, towards the end, of that, she brought up this word called forgiveness. And I had done quite a bit of healing. I wasn't all the way healed, but I had done quite a bit of healing at this point. Now, also at this same time, I had dove into personal development, right? Working on myself, working on my limiting beliefs, working on trying to become a better guy, a better dude, a better boyfriend, right? And so I had dove into personal development. So one hand, I've got the personal growth, personal development. The other side, I've got my counseling.
Mhm.
So I'm one could say I'm picking myself up and trying to do something with my life so that this freaking crazy of a circus doesn't follow me the rest of my life, you know? And my counselor's talking to me about forgiveness. And I remember stopping her. I think it was maybe it was the third meeting in, but the third time she started talking to me about forgiveness, I said, "Well, hold on. I already know what forgiveness is, and he doesn't deserve it. So we should just be moving on to something different." That's what I
You
said,
got a point. Yeah.
you know? And she just looked at me. And again, Tim, I had the right counselor. She just looked at me and she went, "That's certainly one way to look at it. I don't know if it's the right way."
Mm.
And I almost got mad. I was like, "What the hell did she just say?
What am I
What do you
looking
mean it's not
for?
the right way?"
Take my side.
Yeah, right. And so she never forced anything on me, but what she did that was so brilliant was she was really good at helping me to open up the door, and then it would sit there And the information would just stare me in the face.
Uh,
And then I'd be like, holy crap. I'd have this light bulb moment.
mhm.
Our sessions continued on for a while longer. And by the time I was done seeing her, I realized I needed to at least work and try to process this, to let go of it. I knew that. And I got married. I was 29 years old, got married for the first time. And part of my being, if you will, was I knew enough to know that I didn't want to drag all of this shit into my marriage and then hope and pray that my marriage is going to work because Mr. freaking screwed up here, didn't empty out his baggage, right?
Yeah.
I think, and a little side note on that, sometimes people don't understand that it's really nobody else's job to deal with your crap.
Yeah.
It's your job. Now, I know that's going to piss some people off. They don't want to hear that. It's the,
Yeah.
why should my wife be responsible to help me fix my crap when she had nothing to do with it? She was completely removed from it.
Yeah.
Didn't I marry her for the two of us to have an amazing life together? So I knew enough that I knew I had to continue to let this thing go, right? I'd done some healing. And so I started working on forgiving this man. Okay. Now, you heard me say in the beginning, I believe anything is forgivable if you hold the right belief about it and if you understand who forgiveness is for.
Mhm.
Okay. I will die on that hill because I was able to eventually forgive that man. I hold no animosity towards him. I hold no anger. Um, I have no bitterness. I would never, ever say I want him to rot in hell. And I think by the tone in my voice as I've talked about him, I think you can verify that I truly have been able to let go of that.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, I mean, we've all done things, some a lot worse than others that we want forgiveness for. And the fact that you can understand by you forgiving him, you're really helping yourself. You're not necessarily helping him. Sure, he may get some help out of that, but you're doing it for yourself and for your wife and your family. And man, that's incredible
Yeah.
to come to that.
So here's the I'll come back to this, but there are 6 areas, and I have identified these. There's 6 areas where people get stuck on forgiveness. Now I'm going to come back to those for a second.
Hmm.
The piece to this that people have to understand, they have to understand. And here's the deal, Tim. There's been people that have went through a lot worse stuff than me. And I acknowledge that. Well, you got to
Yeah.
think about, that when you think of child sex trafficking, I mean,
Yeah.
dude, that is,
Horrible.
I don't, that is
Yeah.
horrible evil that, you know, um, and there's other things, women who are kidnapped and raped time and time again for months and months. I mean, there's just horrible things, children being innocent, children being killed in the street. I'm only here to say I have experienced some really bad stuff.
Hmm.
And if you hold the right understanding about what forgiveness is, you can forgive it. Now, here's where these 6 pieces start. The first thing is you have to want to let it go. You have to want to let it go. If you are harboring bitter feelings, ill feelings, and you're thinking about how am I going to get revenge? How am I going to make this wrong right? How am I gonna get my vengeance?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not going to be able to forgive anybody.
No, you're
Okay,
poisoning yourself.
you're poisoning yourself. 100%, Tim. You're absolutely right. Okay. The first thing is you have to want to. Now, when you go through something really, really horrible, there is a series of processes that you have to go through to get to a place where you're ready to let go. So hence, sometimes people hold on to something for years and years and years and years. And then I've heard other stories where there's been something really awful happen, and like the mother or the grandmother or the aunt, was able to forgive that person in a short amount of time. They still went through a process.
Hmm.
And what takes someone a month to be able to forgive takes another person 10 years to forgive. There's not a right or a wrong here, but you have to go through the process. And what do I mean by that? It's okay to feel the anger. It's okay to feel the hurt. It's okay to feel just absolutely raging, pissed off, angry. It's okay to scream and yell, put your head in a pillow and scream and yell and cry and let the emotions out. Those are all part of the human experience. And if you suppress those, it's going to be harder to forgive.
You just touched a nerve with me saying the human experience. I have a little history with asking God, what is this all about? And
Yeah.
my answer was, it's the human experience. So
Yeah. Yeah.
jump in.
And you know what? And it's freaking messy sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's messy and it doesn't make sense. And sometimes we look at it and we go, how can there be any justice in what has happened here? How can an amazing, loving God allow something like this to happen? I've asked those questions, but we've got to go through that process. First one is you got to want to. Here's the second one. The second one, you have to understand that forgiveness is not for the other person. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness is for me. It's for you, Tim. That person feels nothing or gets no benefit by you releasing.
Mm-hmm.
They get no benefit. You do, I do, by completely releasing that. That forgiveness piece is for me. I did not choose to forgive my father for him. Why would I ever? What a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
I chose to forgive for me because I didn't want to carry that baggage, that anger, that bitterness. I didn't want to carry that around for the rest of my life. Okay. So that's the second point. Forgiveness is not for the other person. I don't know where in our culture, where in our society that we tend to think that, well, that person they don't deserve forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that statement.
Mm-hmm.
But the forgiveness is not for them. The forgiveness is for me
Mm-hmm.
because I'm worth it, right? I'm worth letting that go and not carrying that ton of bricks on my back of being raging pissed off at my father because he took my mom's life. I'm worth that. Okay. So the second one, forgiveness is for you. And that's a belief thing with a lot of people. They have this belief that it's really for the other person. Not really. There's really virtually no benefit for them. There's especially no benefit if they didn't ask for it.
Yeah.
And my father never asked for it. My father never was remorseful. Not once.
Did he ever admit to it or?
No, I never talked to him again.
Oh, wow.
Never talked to him again. Yeah. So I did the forgiveness. I gave that for me. Now I did write him a letter, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay. Here's the third thing. Sometimes people think that if I forgive somebody, I have to trust them again. Not true. Forgiveness does not equal access. Okay. My dad was still a bad dude. He was still very manipulative. At this point in my life, I had 2 young daughters. I have a wife. Do you think as a dad, it would be smart of me to put my family around that man, knowing all that he's done? No way.
Hell no. No.
No, hell no. Absolutely not. Right? So you can forgive somebody and you do not have to trust them. Does not mean you have to bring them back in your inner circle.
Mm-hmm.
Does not. That does not equal access. You can release and say, you know what? You're too toxic. You're too damaging. you're to this, you're to that, whatever it is. You do not have to give someone access when you forgive them. So that's another piece. Okay, so the fourth one, Tim, the fourth one. Forgiveness is not always a one-time event. Okay? I I can say today, I can forgive you. Or, you know what? I forgive you. I let it go. Who cares? Right? But tomorrow, when that thought comes back in head, guess what? I'm going to
Just-
feel a little,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So forgiveness is not always a one-time event.
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress. I probably forgave my father 120 to 140 times over the course of 13 years to get to a place where I genuinely meant it.
Yeah.
And here's what I would do. Those harsh memories. You know, I never saw my mom's body as it lay on her bed, but I did see the room after she was pulled out of there. And those are things you never forget.
100%.
And it was very easy at one point to look at that and get raging pissed off. It was also very easy to get mad on the day that my wife and I got married and my mom couldn't be there to say, congratulations, son. It was easy to get mad when I'm holding my baby girl and I'm the first, Tim, I'm the first one to hold her. She's seconds old. Comes out of mom, doctor says, here you go, dad. And I'm holding her. She's seconds old. And the thought goes through my head, I wish my mom could be here to see this.
Yeah.
Right. And those are the times that when you feel that anger creep up, you have to be intentional and say, no, 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 I forgive him. I am not going to carry this anger around. I forgive him. And I said it out loud. And sometimes I would say it under my breath.
Mm-hmm.
I probably did that, I don't know, 130, 140 times because I truly did not want to be burdened and carry that around with me for the rest of my life.
It's just something else he's controlling you on, and why give him that power, you know?
It's a very, forgiveness is a process. But I also think it's a process you have to intentionally work on. I've had some people come to me in the past and say, I'm working on it. I'm working on forgiving my uncle for what he did or whatever. And there's a part of me that wants to be very compassionate. And there's also a part of me that wants to go, yeah, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
What are you genuinely doing to let go of this? Because it's easy to say, if I say, well, I'm just working on it, it gives me a free pass to buy a little more time that I didn't have to work on it.
Yeah.
Right. So there's pieces to this that you kind of have to walk through. And sometimes people get it done quick and sometimes it takes a while. But the more important piece is that you do work on it.
Mm-hmm.
Up until, this was 1991. So we're sitting here in now the year 2025. There were family members that up until 10 years ago, if the subject got brought up and there was a few drinks being had, holy crap, tempers would fly. And I mean, people were still, not me, but other family members.
Yeah.
Holy crap. It'd be like, whoa, hold on. Calm down.
Storm the prison.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So there's this, when I say anything is forgivable, I don't say that lightly for the people that are listening. And no, I don't know your situation and I don't know your story and I don't know the hell you might have went through, but I do know the hell that I went through.
Mm-hmm.
And I suspect that some of those feelings and some of those thoughts and some of those memories, probably there's some crossover in there, I think the last piece that, gosh, dang it. Sorry, Tim. Why am I struggling to remember this?
I think it's in the air today because I've been doing the same thing all day.
It must be.
You're good. No, don't worry about it.
I am going to find. Oh, here we go. Let's see if I can find it. I've got these notes and I should have had them pulled up.
While you're searching for that.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
people are, there are so many people out there who are struggling or have experienced things and they um haven't forgiven. And I'm gonna take my own family, and my
Mhm.
parents listen to this, so sorry, Dad. But like his siblings, like hit my dad and then his brother, and he's got two other brothers and a
Mm.
sister, and it's like those people have barely said 5 words to each other in the last 25 years ever since my grandmother passed away, and it's like, there's this tension and nobody seems to wanna forgive each other, just and it's all childhood shit, it's nothing even
Yeah.
major, and it's like, "You guys, like, I'm just taking this time to if you're listening, you guys need to talk to each other and straighten this shit out." This is such a strong message that you're putting out there to people because, bro, if you can forgive your dad, not that he's in your life or anything like that, but
Right.
to be able to forgive and move on and be a good husband and father and understand that, the alcohol and all this stuff is doing nothing good for you, and to seek therapy. So many people avoid that type of stuff. And so the fact that you were able to understand that and take those steps is very impressive.
The piece for me, honestly, Tim, was that I I was just young enough that I realized that if I didn't deal with this was gonna freaking haunt me the rest of my life.
Hmm.
And that that was probably my biggest piece was that I didn't this was like a backpack full of bricks.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I do not wanna carry this around. I'm a young man. I my whole life ahead of me. I do not wanna carry this around, you know? And so that's where I kinda went, "I gotta let go of this stuff. I cannot afford to carry this around because it's gonna screw up my marriage. It's gonna screw up my relationships. I'm gonna be an a-hole to people. I'm not gonna be nice to be around." I knew I had to deal with it. And I think some people get into a space where they're like, well, if I just bury it or I don't think about it.
Hmm.
I learned from the late Wayne Dyer many, many years ago through my professional development. If you take an apple and you just squeeze the hell out of it, what comes out of it?
Juice, I guess.
If you take a lemon and you just squeeze it, what comes out of it?
Juice.
If you take an orange and you squeeze it, what comes out of it?
Say,
Well,
orange juice.
if you and I get squeezed, what's going to come out of us?
That's hard to say.
What?
It's
Yeah,
gonna be anger, or you're gonna get all that shit out of you. Yeah.
that's it. Whatever's impressed on us must be expressed. And usually that happens in the form of when we get angry, when we get pressure put on us, when we feel like someone betrays us, someone is attacking us. You see what comes out of people,
Mhm.
and it's what's been put in them. I just did not want to carry that crap around with me. I wanted a different outcome. And I realized that if I didn't deal with this stuff, I was going to turn out to be just like my dad.
Yeah. I don't know how you found such an excellent counselor, therapist, and somebody who could actually walk you through this process. I know there's good people out there, but you said, there's good and there's bad
Mhm.
therapists, and you never know what you're going to get. And I'm so thankful for you to that you were able to like find somebody who actually worked for you, and to have the self-awareness that like, hey, I can't be carrying this around. This is not gonna benefit
Yeah.
me in the long run. And I
Yeah.
mean, how long did it take you to really, obviously you forgave your dad of many, many, many times over your life, but like to really start your recovery journey, and feel like you were getting some relief from this? How long did that take you?
Yeah, I think the short answer, Tim, is it took somewhere around 11 to 13 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And, by this time I had daughters and they were young. When I had reached a point that I had forgiven him, I really kind of, some people would call it meditate. Some people would call it pray. Some people would call it, they kind of internalize. But I really was like, okay, I have forgiven this man. How do I let him know that?
Hmm.
He needs to know that I have let go of all of this.
Hmm.
And that was kind of the last piece. Now, did I have to do that? I didn't have to, but there was a part of me that felt like, you should do that.
Yeah.
And that's the final piece, right? You've done all this work, you've sorted through all this stuff, and we're just going to let it go. And it took about a year because I thought, okay, one of these days he's going to get out and I'm going to be in a grocery store and I'm going to come around an aisle and boom, there he is. What are you going to say, Scott? What are you going to do? How are you going to act? So for me, this is going to be different, right? This will be different for everybody. But for me, it was a letter.
Hmm.
It was a letter that took me not very long, a couple months, month and a half to write, like 7, 8 page letter. And I wrote it all out. And I basically, the very, very shorthand version is I said, I want to let you know something. I have been able to forgive you for all of the horrible shit you have put me through. I have forgiven you for all the times you yelled and screamed and belittled me, embarrassed me. I forgive you for all the times I watch you beating on my mom. I forgive you for taking my mom's life. And I have forgiven you that you failed epically at being a father. Just so you know, I don't carry any anger towards you for what you did. I let it all go. I actually hope that in your last years, I genuinely hope, and I meant it when I said it, I genuinely hope that you can find some peace in the last years of your life. And I said, oh, by the way, this is not an invitation to come back into mine. Don't call me. Don't seek me out. That door is closed. And I meant it. And he got that letter. It was about 2 months before he got out.
Wow.
And I know he read the letter because my sister told me that he got it and he read it. So there was such a calmness about that, to be able to let that go. As I just said, to let it go for me. There's another element to this, and I'm going to talk to the dads for a second. Your kids are watching you. Your kids are watching everything that you do. They are listening to everything they say, and they are especially listening to the way that you talk about their grandparents. Are you putting positive things into their mind, or are you putting negative things into their mind, right? Are you using degrading, disrespectful words? Now, look, I understand some of us were raised by people that missed the mark badly, and I understand that. I'm not covering up for anything that they did. But how we talk about our parents in front of our kids, understand something one day. They may talk about you to their kids. And what are they going to say? What are the words they're going to use to describe it? See, I wanted to change. I wanted to break the cycle because my dad's dad and his dad, they were all alcoholics. They were very abusive men. I remember my dad telling me when I was probably 10 years old, my dad telling me a story that one time his dad would go and his dad would get drunk and he'd come home from the bar and he'd tie a rope around my dad's waist and then throw him off the end of the dock into the mill pond to teach him how to swim. And he didn't know how to swim. He almost would drown. But that's the kind of man who raised my father. So while I don't make any excuses for what he did, I also say, okay, so where does the buck stop?
Yeah.
Where does the buck stop? For me, I decided when I was a teenager that the buck stopped with me, right? My kids were not going to grow up with a father like that. My kids know the story of my dad. Even though they've heard me say things that he did, they've never heard me call him names.
Hmm.
I just tell them what he did and they make their own assessment,
Mhm.
right? So in addition to not wanting to carry this crap around and letting go of the past, what example are you setting for your kids? What example are you setting for your grandkids? We're all setting examples, right, Tim?
Every day. Yeah,
Every
good
day.
and bad. And, man, the buck does stop with you, the people listening, and me and my children and your children were, we
Yeah.
are the future of the generations after us.
We, I, and maybe it's the personal development, maybe it's the counselor, but I had just always felt like I had a responsibility to be a good husband.
Mhm.
And I had a higher level responsibility to raise healthy, productive, loving, respectful kids.
Mhm.
And if I had not affixed myself, I wouldn't have been able to do that. Here's the last piece on the forgiveness part. When you forgive somebody, it does not excuse what they did. There's no free pass. You are not letting them off the hook if you forgive them. That changes nothing. Again, you're releasing the anger. What they did, there are still consequences for whatever they did. And karma, the universe, God has a way of it's a way of cleaning the slate,
Oh, yes, he does.
right? I would love your feedback or if you have any questions, but here's how this ended. I never did have connection with my father again. And in the state of Oregon, when you're released from prison, and you go on parole, you are released back to the same county of where the crime was committed. So he didn't live that far from me. I never saw him. I never sought him out. I had no interest. That door had closed. I did find out after it happened, but during COVID, he had health issues. He had heart issues. He had lung issues. He had some other health issues, and he was in his 80s by this point. He caught COVID. He was admitted to one of the local hospitals, and that man died alone in a hospital room with no one around, grasping for air, trying to breathe.
God is good. Sorry. Karma, man.
And yeah, and now I didn't know that until
Yeah.
after it happened. My sister called me the day after it happened. But some of those things, they work themselves out because he was seeking out to do really disgusting things to little girls, because he was a master manipulator. He ruined a lot of relationships. He ruined a lot of lives. I think the world is probably a safer place without him in it. I don't have any joy in saying that. I'm just making a general statement. I think the world is it's probably a better place because he's not trying to manipulate people. He's not trying to. My sister, 2 years after he was off parole, invited him into his house because he didn't have a place to stay. He manipulated my sister against her husband, and my sister finally recognized it and said, "You're out of here. This isn't going to work. You're not going to stay here anymore." So here's a man was probably at that point in his early 80s that was still trying to manipulate. He was still trying to do just evil things. And I never experienced any of that because I put a boundary in place, right? I said, "No, you're not welcome back into my life." It doesn't matter to me that my kids never met their grandfather. I think they're better off not meeting their grandfather,
Yeah, some people, forgive, but you got to wash your hands of it and
You
let
do.
them go their way. Yeah, you don't want to have those toxic people in your life. Forgive, don't forget,
But
move on.
that's exactly right. There is another piece, Tim, that says sometimes people feel like, well, here's an example. This has been many years ago. I was sitting in church and the pastor was talking about forgiveness, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
And this lady, a pew in front of me, under her breath, not loud, but I just heard her say, "Well, you haven't really forgiven them if you haven't forgotten about it."
Oh, bull crap.
And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I worked through a lot and understand that, I'm not casting stones at any particular one person or especially a church, but I am saying that we've been fed a line of crap. If you have bought into that, that's a line of crap. There would there you're never required to forget.
No.
You're never required to forget. Here's what we do. We forgive so that when I come on the Tim Teaches podcast and I share my story, I'm not angry,
Yeah.
right? I'm not mad. I'm not like
Yeah.
because I haven't dealt with all of my crap. I've dealt with it. I can still remember how it feels. I still think about my mom and sometimes get emotional, when I think about how, my daughters never got to play with their grandma, you know. Um, I think those are very human things. That's part of being a human. But you are never expected to forget it. We forgive so that when we remember, we're not angry. We're not. It doesn't ruin our day.
Yeah.
It doesn't ruin our life. It doesn't ruin our relationships. So you know, there we go. We circled around and came up with all six of them.
We did it, man. Scott, incredible story. Tragic, horrible, sad story, but very powerful, and your perspective on things is it's the way we all need to live. And some of us are trying to get down that path of forgiveness. Others will, some will never reach it. But if you're listening and you have had these kind of traumas, and you're trying to deal with it, Scott's approach is the way to go, man. I truly believe in it, and I really appreciate you sharing your story with me. If people want to get a hold of you and reach out to you, what's the
Yeah.
best way to get a hold of
Yeah,
you?
you know what? If you got a situation, if this has sparked a nerve, if this has spoke to you, feel free to send me an email. You can send it to Scott Stewart Speaking at Gmail.
Okay.
Scott Stewart Speaking at Gmail. That's STEWART. Shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you. If there's some little thing I can do, this isn't a pitch for coaching, but I have helped people work through some of those things. Um, and if you've listened to this and I struck a nerve and you got pissed at me, I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to, but there is a path through this. There is a path through what you're going through, and but it's a process. And sometimes we get stuck in that. So Scott Stewart Speaking at gmail.com. Shoot me an email. You can find me I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on there as well. And then I've got two Facebook pages, but find my professional Facebook page. That's author, speaker, encourager, Scott Stewart, author, speaker, encourager. Follow me along. Don't be upset if I don't reply. The way that AI and the scammers, yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a message or something if this touched you. And
Absolutely.
I appreciate the time, Tim. It means a lot. Thank you.
I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. I will tag you in everything and put your links we're on YouTube and Spotify and everything. So
Yeah, that's cool.
and we'll chat again.